Nerds, and welcome back to Ask an Ecologist. My name is Suzanne Simpson, and I'm an ecologist for Bayou Land Conservancy here in Houston. And each week, I take your questions about the natural world, and we talk about the different curiosities in our own backyard and beyond. It is quite literally the dog days of summer right now, which is a good segue into our main topic that we'll be discussing after your questions, which is cicadas. And one of the ones that we have here are the dog day cicadas. But first, let's get into your questions this week. The first one comes from Ricardo Valdez, who asked me to speak about the mala mujer plant. If you've never heard of it, mala mujer, which translates to bad mother, is a nickname for the Texas bull nettle, which is Nitoscolus texanus, and that is an herbaceous perennial plant that's pretty common around the state and in different soil types that we have around here in the Houston area. And it has a white flower in the summer, and it's best known and best feared for the stinging hairs that it has along its stem. And those hairs, if you touch them, they can be really intensely painful and can keep stinging and burning and itching for hours after you touch the plant. So that's how it got its nickname, Mala Mujer. That nickname, I think, I've heard it more from the Southwest, like plants in the bull nettle family that are in the Southwest, but it is also attributed to the Texas bull nettle as well. In general, if you see a plant that seems exceptionally hairy or spiny, it's always good to not touch it until you know for sure what it is, kind of the same way to operate around caterpillars. But other than, while it may be a bummer for us whenever we touch it, and it's not a particularly good forage plant for livestock, the flowers do attract pollinators, so it has its own place in nature, but that place probably isn't in your hand. So good to stay away from that. If you haven't seen a bull nettle before, we are going to post one. Bayou Land Conservancy is going to post one for our Flower Friday segment tomorrow, so keep your eye out on that, and you can learn what a Texas bull nettle looks like. But that is what the skinny is on Mala Mujer, and thank you, Ricardo, for submitting your questions. Now I want to dive into the topic of cicadas. Cicadas are one of the most ubiquitous parts of our summer here in Texas. We hear them calling really throughout the summer, but there's a particular 4 to 6 week period midsummer where they tend to be at their loudest. So let's chat a bit about cicadas, their life cycles, or they're preyed upon, and whether or not we can expect a large bloom of cicadas in the near future. So there are over 40 species of cicadas in Texas, and they are the world's loudest insect. They hold the record for the world's loudest insect. The loudest one in North America, that species is as loud as a chainsaw. So they can really, really vocalize. And unlike grasshoppers, they're not vocalizing by rubbing their legs together, but they have this vibrating special membrane called a timbal that vibrates on their abdomen, and that's how they're making that sound. And like other species that call, the males are the noisiest. The males are calling to attract a mate. And so that's what you're hearing at night as they're trying to get somebody interested in being their partner and passing on their genes. Cicadas are sometimes referred to as locusts, but locusts are actually grasshoppers. Whenever the early white settlers came to this area, they saw the massive amount of cicadas that were here, and they sort of likened it to the biblical plague of locusts, and so the name sort of stuck. So you will see people sometimes refer to cicadas as locusts, but one difference between them that's important is cicadas aren't considered agricultural pests. They do feed off of the nymphs feed off of the saplings, the sap in the root systems, but they don't harm the plant. It's a fair balance between them, and so they're not considered agricultural pests the same way that we think of locusts, killing and eating tons and tons of crops. It's not the same with cicadas. They're just really noisy. That's their biggest drawback, is that they're just really noisy and they're really loud. cicadas do have some natural predators. One is the cicada killer wasp. That is a very large insect, several inches long, that will attack and kill cicadas. They're very impressive looking, very intimidating looking, and they really specialize in taking down cicadas. Another predator that was lesser known until recent years is the copperhead. So copperheads generally are not tree climbers. Pit vipers and generally are not big climbers, but copperheads will climb up trees late at night, early morning, so like between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. And they will climb up trees in groups sometime. Not that they're intentionally, forming herds, but the groups of the snakes are attracted to the cicadas, and they will feast on cicadas all night. It's an easy meal for them. It has a lot of energy within the source, and so it becomes a really, really good source of summer food for copperheads. So if you have a big tree in your backyard, especially like a big oak tree, and you see copperheads are crowding around it at night, chances are they're going after the cicadas that are living on that tree bark. So keep an eye out for that. The most common question that I get about cicadas is how long do they last and how long are their life cycles? So cicadas will call for as long as they need to secure a mate and complete their life cycle. And so down here, that usually results in about 4 to 6 weeks of really heavy, really loud calling. A lot of times it starts in June and it'll become most prominent in July, so where we are right now in mid-July, and then it'll fade out towards the end of the summer. It always depends on external weather conditions. Some years you may not even get them until September. Some years you'll have them closer to springtime. But in general, the cicadas are pretty synonymous with the summertime. And that's what we're experiencing right now are the summertime cicadas. So after they mate, they're going to lay their eggs in the tree bark. And then the nymph are going to crawl into the soil by the tree where they will live in that soil until the next summer. And then their life cycle will continue. For most of the cicadas around here, we have a life cycle of about 2 to 5 years. We have a lot of species of annual cicadas that you will expect to see every year. But we do have a brood of cicadas in northeast Texas. It's known as brood number 4. That of periodic cicadas that emerge every 17 years. So periodic cicadas are the ones that usually make the news because they are periodic. They only come every 13 to 17 years. And whenever they do emerge, it's like a biblical proportion of cicadas. It's a huge amount. They're very loud. They're very noteworthy. They're easy to identify and distinguish from other cicadas. So in northeast Texas, sort of in that Texoma area, like Wichita Falls, is where we have the reports of the brood 4, which is also known as the Kansas brood of cicadas. They last emerged in 2015, and we next expect them to emerge in 2032. So mark your calendars. But last year, there were reports in the Dallas area of these periodic cicadas emerging outside of their normal life cycle. And those are basically small numbers of stragglers that basically got the date wrong and they're emerging in the wrong year. And I'm sure they're very embarrassed, but they were appearing in the Dallas area also. And so you will occasionally get individuals that are a little bit off rhythm with the rest of their brood and are emerging in different years. But those big blooms of cicadas are going to be every 13 to 17 years. And 2032 is when we're expecting to see a big, big boon of them next time. The mechanics of the timing process of cicada life cycles are still pretty poorly understood and are one of the interesting mysteries of the insect world that we're still doing research to try and figure out. Mathematical modeling has indicated that it may have something to do with predator avoidance, but there's still a lot more that we have to understand about why cicadas have these life cycles, and especially the periodic cicadas that only emerge a couple times in our lifetime, why they are doing that kind of a life cycle. So there's still research going on about that to better understand that, because we don't really know for sure why that's happening as it is. But in summary, cicadas are a healthy part of our ecosystem. You don't have to worry about them destroying large numbers of crops. They provide a boon of resources for the predators that count on them every summer to be a source of protein, a source of food for them. The only big drawback about cicadas is if you have a big population behind your house, you might need to sleep with earplugs because they are very, very loud. But that's the long and short of them. If you have any other questions about cicadas that I didn't cover, I'd love to hear them. If you have any questions about any natural topic, you can always submit them to info@bayouland.org, or you can leave us a comment on our Facebook. And next week, we are going to have a guest host. I will be out, but we are blessed with not only one, but two ecologists at Bayou Land Conservancy. And Becky Martinez, our conservation director, is going to take over for Ask an Ecologist next week. So tune in and be sure to give Becky a lot of grief for her first Facebook Live video. I'll see you the week after that. Thanks for hanging out with me, and see you next time.